Thank you both for joining me for this conversation and for all of the work that you have been doing on behalf of the people of this great state of Washington. Senator Wilson is the sponsor of referendum measure number 90, which is on every Washingtonian's ballot for this November 3rd. And it's a very important measure that will be bringing, or is proposing to bring, comprehensive sex education to Washington public schools. And here to discuss A, why that's important, and B, how it came to be that you got this on the ballot, is Senator Claire Wilson.
Well, I just can't even tell you, Misha. I'm humbled to be here tonight and thankful that you care enough to give us some airtime. The bill was called 5395, and I was elected to the Senate 2 years ago, and I don't do anything small. So it was one of the first bills that I actually dropped to pass. And part of that is because my experience has been working with kids and families for the last 35 years. And really, I started teaching 11 to 21-year-old pregnant and parenting teens, and no fifth grader should be a parent. And as we think about this subject of comprehensive sexuality health education, and in my work with young children, with families, and with youth across our state, it's critically important, and their voices matter, and they are asking for information so they're able to be informed, make good decisions, and also know that they have body autonomy, that they have a right to say no, but they also know they've got safe places and safe spaces where they can gather information and also share things that might be happening to them in order to keep them safe.
And how did this come to be a referendum measure?
Well, again, the first session, I do what's called dropped it. So we dropped the legislation. It was heard in committee in the Senate, passed through to the Senate floor, where we voted it off the floor. And the next step is over to the House. And unfortunately, the first session did not get through the House. So I brought it back last session, and it went to the House Education Committee, where it was passed through there, then went to the House floor, where it was passed after much debate, and then came back over to the Senate. Once it was signed in by the governor in March, there were individuals who did not agree with the legislation as it was passed, so went on the process of creating this referendum by collecting hundreds of thousands of signatures during the pandemic in order to get it on the ballot, which is why we're here today and why we're asking for folks to approve it, and that is to approve it as it was passed in legislation in March and signed into law by the governor.
And can you shed any light on what it is that that the opposition, what complaints the opposition have with this bill? I mean, to me, it seems like, of course, you would want that. So I'm curious what the resistance is about.
I think there's a lot of misinformation going out that this is around sexualizing children and this bill is around sex, when in fact it's around safety and it's a public health issue. I think it's also around the fact that we have young people that we know are struggling, and we know adolescents, their job in adolescence is to explore. And when we see increased rates of suicide and increased rates of self-harm, we also know we have young people who are struggling to get information, and those are young people in our LGBTQ community. And so, again, they need to have safe places and safe spaces to ask questions and to get the right information so they can make the right decisions. And then I'll just say also, the issue of consent education is critically important in bystander training. And those were two pieces that were brought to me by young people themselves who had experienced coercion and relationships that they found out later on were not healthy. And had they been given this information and given the knowledge and the vocabulary and the language early on, they feel like they would have not been in the situations they were in. And those speak volumes when we talk about the why. And so this is also not about not talking to your family. Your family would always be the first place we would want young people to go. But there are some people who don't have family members they're able to chat with. So we need to have other trusted adults.
I think it's probably also relevant to flag the fact that this legislation does give parents who have serious objections the option to opt their children out of this sex ed program. So it's not something that is being universally required of all families and all students.
Correct, and that's been lifted in this version of the legislation. And the other thing I think that's critically important is that there is not a curricula that you will have heard, and many people will say we have chosen a curriculum. You'll see pictures that are very inappropriate that say this is what is being taught, when in fact we have 295 school districts, and each one of them will adopt their own curricula using an adoption committee like they would any other subject in their district. Math, language arts, social studies, it would be the same. And so it's a local control issue as long as it meets the standards that are part of the Washington State Learning Standards for K-12.
Well, to me, not surprisingly, I think this sounds like a no-brainer. I hope that everyone who's watching this will vote to support this referendum measure. And if you have questions, or if you were looking for more resources about this particular bill or other items that you find on your ballot, where are good resources for people to turn?
Well, if you went on to just the, if you Googled Senate Bill 5395, or if you Googled approve referendum 90, you will find plenty of resources that you could peruse and also share with those that you know. And it's important to talk to folks that are in your own circles to make sure they understand the accuracy around what this bill is and what the bill is not, in order for them to also approve referendum 90.
I have a question here from Heather, who's on the Zoom call, and I'm paraphrasing here, but what is it? What is the statewide sex ed curriculum that is implemented now? Is there any kind of universal Washington State sex ed education going on at this point?
60% of our school districts are currently teaching some form of sexuality health education. However, there is not one curriculum. The job of our state office of superintendent of public instruction is to vet the curricula in order to support school districts to make sure that the curriculum they have does meet standards, but every district adopts their own.
Great. I wanted to maybe shift topic for a second and ask if there are any other races that are on the Washington state ballots that are critical at this point, that are tight, and that you think bear mentioning.
So I'll jump in on that one. And actually, before I go to that, if I can say one other thing on the sex ed bill, absolutely approve I-90, referendum 90. And I just want to add, I've been working in the domestic violence field with survivors of trafficking, sexual assault. And if we want to make sure that the next generation is not being victimized because of domestic violence or sexual assault or trafficking, a comprehensive sex education is key to that. Because we know that when we have curriculum that is scientifically accurate and teaches people about healthy relationships and consent, you see a dramatic decrease in domestic violence, sexual assault, and trafficking. So let's make sure we rely on science, and let's make sure our next generation just know how to have healthy relationships. So with that, I actually would love to chat about the Secretary of State race. A lot of people don't understand why that is an important race, or why it is so crucial for Washington to make sure that we are electing a Gail Tarleton, who is running for this position. And we are at the forefront, Washington State, when it comes to election rights. We do mail-in ballots. Hopefully everyone has already received their ballots by now. If you haven't, please go to your local King County Elections office and track your ballot to make sure it's on its way. And we get to sit at home in the comfort of our homes and then vote. And we can drop our ballots in the mailbox or in ballot boxes. And that is something that is not available to the rest of the country. And so if we are really serious about making sure that every citizen in the state of Washington continues to exercise their right to vote, we have to make sure we have a champion of voting rights in the state. And the progress that we have made in the state is not because of our current Secretary of State, it is in spite of her. So voting for Gail Talton to be our next Secretary of State will actually ensure that we are moving forward and removing barriers for everyone in our state to exercise their most fundamental of rights.
Thank you. And I think it also might bear mentioning, I think a lot of Washingtonians are very busy and they're paying attention to the biggest issues that are making national news. A lot of probably Washington voters are thinking, I want to vote Donald Trump out of office, but I don't really have to worry about that because Washington is gonna vote Biden anyway, and so I don't really need to turn in my ballot. But these the referendum measure number 90 is critical, and that is not a sure thing. The Secretary of State race is critical, and that is not a sure thing. So making sure to cast your ballot is critical, not only because it sets a good example for how successful universal mail-in balloting can be for the rest of the country, which would be a great path to set the nation on, but also because there are all of these other down ballot races and measures that are statewide and statewide seats that are critical and that are not sure things. So your vote does matter, it does count. Even if it may not be quite so critical for Washingtonians voting in the presidential contest right now. That's my 2 cents, my 2 amateur cents. Thank you both. I was just reflecting, I wish that I had comprehensive sex ed when I was in elementary school and junior high school, because I know that I went into my my early and frankly even later adult sexual relationships with a lot of confusion and a lot of shame and not really knowing how to successfully talk about things, leaving things left unspoken because it seemed taboo, and a lot of I think a lot of my life would have been better if I had been equipped with those skills, which are really important and frankly not that complicated. So I thank you for championing this work, and I wish you would come along 30 years ago in Massachusetts.
Well, thank you for your support.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time to talk to us, and good luck.
Thank you so much, Misha. It's always a pleasure.
Yes.
Pleasure talking to you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.